everyone. Welcome to the next episode of the More Magic podcast. Today, we are discussing The Bear and the Nightingale by Katherine Arden. And today is a special episode. Marianne wasn't able to join for the book club this month, so I have Flavia Brunetti has returned to talk about this book with me. If you listen to the last episode on books that changed how we see the world, she was on that as well. And if you haven't listened to it, definitely go check it out because you had so many good recommendations. I think I told you I added literally all of them to my list. So now I have just an insane amount of books that I have to read this year. So, but thank you for joining.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And it's really nice to be back. And I also added a bunch of books to my to be read from that conversation of all of the ones that you girls were talking about. So I also have to get caught up with you.
Yeah, it was so fun. Well, I'm so excited to have you join today because, yeah, I love all of your recommendations. So I'm so curious to hear your thoughts on this book because we actually finished one instead of just adding books to our list. We knocked one off instead. But just a reminder for everyone, since it's a book club episode, there's going to be a lot of spoilers because we're talking about the book in detail. So just a warning if you have not read it. But let's just start with the world and the magic. So I was excited to read this one because I had seen it. It must have been years ago because this is an older book. I saw it and I was like, "Oh, it like looks Russian. The cover is, beautiful." And then I never picked it up and then people in my book club were like, "This book is amazing. This is one of my favorite books ever. It's the perfect winter book," which is so true. Reading this in, I guess, January, end of December is pretty much when it's set, like around that time period. I guess it is the course of a lot of years. But I loved the setting because I've never read anything set in Russia or even Eastern Europe, really, that's fantasy the way that this one was. Have you read anything quite like this?
No, not like this. I've read some really great Ukrainian children's books. And
Oh,
I actually, what I found really interesting about the setting for this one is that she's talking about, and you see it at the end. I mean, talking about spoilers, the notes in the back, she was talking about how she's talking about, I'm probably going to mispronounce it, but Rus with the little hyphen
mm-hmm.
at the end,
Apostrophe, yeah.
apostrophe. And she was talking about how it's not the modern Russian state, right? And in fact, they're talking about a bunch of different places, like at some point when they're traveling through the region. And it kind of made me look again at kind of the history of that space because it's such a massive physical space. But then,
Mm-hmm.
like you were saying, it's their winters are so intense. And so the whole culture kind of gravitates around, I think. But yeah, it was fascinating. I was curled up under my heated blanket the whole time because she really gets that across.
I know. Well, it's funny because I was reading it, I think a couple nights ago, and it's been colder here in Portland, not Russia level cold, like just, getting near freezing at night. And I was like reading, and then it was the part, this is a side, I guess a side note from the world itself, but I was reading it and I was all cold. And then, and it was the part where the like vampire creature comes and is like knocking on the door and then someone literally came up on our stairs and I heard it and the dog started barking. I was like, "Oh my God." It was just like I had the complete experience of feeling cold and terrified in my real life while reading this. But I really liked I haven't really seen anything where the folklore characters are tending to the home the way that they were in this book. Like I love that there was one living in the fireplace and then helping the horses. And I mean, in the woods makes sense. There's like nymphs and sprites and things like that in a lot of folklore. But it made me want to learn more about Russian folklore because I don't really know. I had never heard of a lot of the creatures and characters in this book. So I don't know if they were made up or if they are based off of, I'm assuming most of them are based off of real folklore.
I think she based a lot of it off of folklore because I have heard of some of the creatures before but in other like in other backgrounds, in other cultures. And
Mm.
also some of the things that she was talking about, like the you know how they do everything like revolves around the oven? Like this was
Yeah.
for me, this was like also the fact like at one point I don't remember what happens to her, but she's all wet and cold and they like lower the oven and shove her into it. And so I was like,
Yeah.
okay, hang on, I need a visual. Like, is this And then I realized that they're huge and that apparently this is also what they do. And I was talking to a friend
Hmm.
who lived in Afghanistan before, and they also have very cold winters. And she told me that also they have this culture where they have a massive oven kind of in the center of the main living room, and the family will just gather around it. And sometimes they'll sleep on top of it, which is also what they do in the book. And I thought it
Oh,
was
that's so
like
interesting.
fascinating that, she's pulling from all of these kind of historical elements that I think apply also in other places. And there's a fantasy series, not in this setting, but and I think you and I had briefly talked about it before, but AJ Lancaster wrote this fantasy series on Stariel. I might be mispronouncing it, but it's like a sentient house and
Mm.
sentient lands. And in that series, they explore also kind of these different creatures that kind of protect the land. And that
Oh,
was, so
okay. That's
I think it's coming from folklore because it's obviously being pulled from, but she did it in a way that I had never seen before. Like she does it
mm-hmm.
in a really cool way.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'll have to check that out. Yeah, the oven thing was so interesting. I kept meaning to look up a picture of it to see because I was like, how do you lay on this? Because it like all of them would. So it had to be huge, you know? And yeah, it's just so that I thought that was really interesting. And that, of course, there's a magical creature living in it when, like, as you said, it's so central to the home. And I loved it because was it the domovoi? Is that how it was pronounced?
The Yes, Domovoy. I may be pronouncing it wrong though.
Okay. Yeah, that's how I was pronouncing it was domovoi. But I liked it because it was, I mean, I know that the idea is that the magic was fading, but it was just seemed like this like small little creature who wouldn't be like, they won't get in, they won't get in. And I just wanted to like just pick up and like give it a hug. Like, thank you for keeping everyone warm and also for protecting, their whole like estate or property. Because it seemed like it was more than just the house. It seemed like it was like all
Yeah,
of their stuff. Yeah.
because at one point, right, when the vampire evil creature thing attacks and he
Hmm.
manages to get in that room and she asks him right after and he's like, "Oh, that's the one room I can't protect." So I think it's like
Oh yeah.
the not just, I mean, I don't know if it's the whole village, but I don't think it's just that house. And then like he's also not getting enough food and he's not getting like, but because she's kind to him, it like makes me emotional that because like all of it kind of changes because of the fact like also the rusalka. I don't know if that's pronounced correctly either, but also the
Hmm.
rusalka, like she says it up front, like she's true to her nature. She's like, when the winter king calls, I will go to him. But then at the
Hmm.
end she protects Vasya because Vasya has been kind to her, and I think that there's a really strong message in that.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, we'll talk about it more with the themes, but also with the way that they defeated the bear was with their dad's sacrifice. Yeah,
Oh.
I mean, that was so sad. I mean, we'll talk to about I really want to talk about him as a character in a minute.
Mhm.
But so thinking more about the actual setting and the magic itself, you had a note about like just showing the reality of the times then, which I agree. I also really liked because there were some things that stood out to me in the beginning when their father was getting ready to remarry. He said something about how he still had all of his teeth. And I was
Mhm.
like, oh, that's like something I didn't even think about, and then later it says something like, his teeth were starting to hurt and that was kind of like showing the aging. Um, which it just felt very immersive in that time period. And I loved that in the experience, but I would not want to be in that time period.
No.
That was my takeaway. Like the how cold it was and how they had to wait for the rivers to freeze before he could go to Moscow and the way that they would go inside in the winter and how brutal the winters were. I did look up the weather because I was like, I don't know exactly where they were. I think it said a town, but I was like, well, I'm just gonna look somewhere like northern Russia and like see what the temperatures are. And it's right now because it's that time, and it was, um, I think a high of like negative 15 Fahrenheit. Um, and so then it was even colder than that. And that was every day. And that was even like sunny and really just so cold that it's hard to think about. It also showed kind of the kindness, like Vasya being kind to the creatures, and she could talk to horses, and she could, because was it the Vizela or something like that? I don't remember how it was pronounced, but the one that lived in the stables. Um, and yeah, then she learned how to communicate with horses and was able to form other connections. Like I thought that was a really beautiful way to show how there was still goodness even in this very harsh world.
Yeah, and you feel bad for her too, right? Because it's kind of, well, at a certain point, it feels like it's just her and her brother's kind of just going along with it out of love for her, because everyone
Hmm.
else is at a certain point either doesn't understand her and so hates her, or is just kind of like, there, but like it's like she's the only active one, actively fighting to protect everyone. And you feel for her. And I mean, like you were saying, it's so immersive the whole time. Immediately you're there. Even at one point she's talking about, I think they're going into a city and she's talking about the stink. And I thought, like, I really
Yeah.
appreciate that. That's because, obviously we all, you're reading about something, and we live in our current times, and, sometimes you romanticize how it was. But then there's also those elements. Like, I appreciated that she really actually put you there and she wasn't glossing over it. Like, you're there, you're cold, you're scared. You realize that if you can't chew your food, that's the end of you, because
Hmm.
it's not, medically, it's not what it is today, obviously. And then how they treat women, but that's, I'm sure we'll talk about that when we get to the themes, because that was a big one that every time I was like, it was giving me a twitch by the end of it. Like, if they kept saying, oh, well, it sucks, but that's just what it is if you're a woman. And I was like, oh, geez, I can't do this. Like,
Yeah, I agree. We definitely will have to dive into that. But I did want to just say for the stink part, that was one that I actually was telling my husband because I was reading and because it was described as they smelled, I think it was Moscow before they got there, and it was like the burn of 10,000 fires or something like that. And that was so vivid to me because, but poor, like even just walking the neighborhood, sometimes if someone has their fireplace going, you can smell that, you know? So then trying to imagine like if it's that cold and there's that many fires and like how overpowering that must have been. It must have been hard to breathe. Um, Breathing in that much, especially since, well, as we were talking about with the ovens, like everyone's life in the winter was around that heat source. So it was probably really intense, just walking into that with that many people. Yeah, it was so immersive. I really loved that. Should we talk about the characters?
yes, yes, yes.
Okay. So, yeah, the dad, I really liked him. I thought his story was so, it was almost his story. Like it was Vasya's story, but it was almost his story too. And I loved in the beginning because when his wife found out that she was pregnant with Vasya, he was scared and she was like, "No, this is the daughter I have to have. She's going to carry on, my family's magic, basically." And he didn't want to remarry, and he did all of these things that if we didn't have insight into his perspective, it would have seemed very almost misogynistic and just true patriarchy. But the reason he remarried is because he was worried about his daughter.
Yeah.
And the reason he was going to have her go get married or go to the convent or any of this stuff is because he had so much love for her and was trying to protect her. And I thought that was a beautiful way to get insight into his perspective and just show, yeah, if you have more of the story, maybe it's not as, I don't want to say oppressive, like it's still oppressive, but you could see why he was doing it, you know? I just really loved his character. I thought it was so fascinating.
He was really, I also felt like he was super, really motivated by love, right? Like, there's this scene in the beginning
Hmm.
where you realize how much also he loved his first wife, right? The Vasya's mother. There's a
Hmm.
scene where she depicts that, like, he put her in the ground himself. And there's just
Yeah,
something
yeah.
about that that just broke my heart. And then that you realize that he never actually meant to remarry, right? He just realizes that he's going to have to, also because the times kind of, like, he envisions that this woman will kind of help raise his daughter so that she can live in this world that is difficult for women, like that he's really doing it for her. And then you're also sad because then when he does all of this, and then as you get further into the book, you realize that, like, Anna is not going to be that mother. So, like, he did
Yeah.
all of this, and, like, all of this stuff happened, and then at the end of the day, it wasn't even that, but he obviously did it with the best of intentions. And then, I don't know, that scene at the end, like, was giving me so much anxiety, also because, like, everybody she loved kept showing up. Like, then it was
I
her brother,
know.
then it was all the creatures she's protected. And I was like, I cannot handle this. Like, and then the dad shows up, and you're like, oh, my anxiety was just through the roof, because it also wars with she's doing everything she can to protect the ones she loves. And that includes the creatures, and it obviously includes her family. And then you realize, like, how at risk that is. And I think it really hits home because we're all like that, right? Like, you have your loved
Hmm.
ones, and those are the people that you would sacrifice yourself for. So the scene at a certain point almost made me laugh, because it was like every single person that made her both vulnerable and stronger was showing up in this clearing, and she obviously wouldn't want them to sacrifice themselves for her, no? So she's desperately trying to save the whole thing. And I don't know, I think it's really easy to kind of relate to that in a less, like, dramatic, kind of Winter King way. But yeah.
Hopefully,
And
hopefully not the same way.
hopefully not the same thing. And then how Peter, yeah, he's completely motivated. Everything he does by love. And you also, I think the author did a really good job of showing also the vulnerabilities of that, like when he doesn't know what to do, um, when he's given that jewel, the blue jewel, and he's told to give it to his
Hmm.
daughter to save his son, and he doesn't know, so he's waffling and, like, holding on to it, and then he gives it to Dunya. And but you realize, because you're seeing it from his perspective, why he's doing all of that. It's very human.
Hmm. Yeah, that's so true because he didn't just protect her. I wouldn't say he had a favorite because he also didn't want his son to join the church and like he wanted to protect, I think, was it Kolya who had the knife to his throat in that scene that you were just talking about. Like it was almost like Peter was like just clinging to his life and like his protecting his family and just struggling with it, but he had to present this very uh traditional masculine leader of this like kind of wealthy estate, but he didn't know what to do and he was alone too, because he lost his love and he would like kind of, there were parts where he would kind of mutter something to her or think to her like, what do I do about your daughter or your kids? Yeah, it makes you want to cry. It's like he was just heartbroken and he had to just figure it out in this like very harsh world. And I really liked that we got his perspective because it yeah, it's something that you don't get a lot. And I feel like we've had a lot of books lately that are through a female character's eyes, which I love. But I think it's also great to still get to sometimes see those male perspectives that are more just human and see the vulnerability and the rawness of what they're experiencing. I really, he was probably my favorite character. When we talk about characters, I think he was my favorite character. But yeah, I really liked him. And his sacrifice at the end, like, well, like you said, like it was everyone she loved and would sacrifice herself for. And it's like, well, if you're willing to if there's that love, of course they're willing to sacrifice themselves for you too. Like that's love, And I really just love how that was presented.
Also, because in the end, that's the most powerful thing, which I think is
Hmm.
so, like, that's such a strong statement. Like, you have this otherworldly king of winter who's unstoppable, and his brother's also magical and clearly can no longer control him. He's broken the bindings, but
Hmm.
this man's sacrifice for his daughter out of love for his loved ones puts him back into sleep, like, or cuts him back down and puts him back in this cage. And you think, like, well, that's so powerful then, right? Like that's more powerful than the Winter King. Now I feel like I'm
Hmm.
gonna cry.
It is so powerful though. We should remember that every winter. The power of love, you know. But I guess the opposite of that would be Constantine. He, well, and honestly, Anna, his second wife, like they both were,
Ugh.
I guess she loved her daughter. She wanted to protect her
Oh
daughter,
yeah.
but
I forget about her daughter.
yeah, so she had a
Yeah,
little
but
redemption and she was so I just felt sad for her because when she was living in the palace or as a royal, she was just kept away like she's crazy, and then she comes up to this like far away, forested house and she's still a child. Like it seemed like she was like 16 or maybe a little older than that when they got married and then has to assume all of this authority and she never processed it, Like I think that's where it's important to kind of cope with whatever trauma you're experiencing. Like she definitely did not do that and viewed like seeing these creatures as very traumatic. Um and yeah, her character was just I was sad when she died because I was hoping that she could have some redemption, that she could see that that these creatures aren't bad. Like maybe this is a special
right.
gift, and she can protect the home and like kind of step into that sort of motherly energy and like be the one protecting the home. And instead she, trusted Constantine and because she was just so afraid. Like through the whole book, she was just so afraid. And living a life with that level of fear is just heartbreaking to me. And it was, yeah, her story was just really tragic.
I found her super tragic. I found her really tragic, and I felt bad for her in the beginning. And then at a certain point, she became so cruel that like I
Yeah.
really like she's also just almost at a certain point it feels almost like gratuitously cruel. And but what you said is right, right? It's really fear. And I think the author does a
Hmm.
really good job because in the beginning she's talking about when she starts talking about Anna, she's saying, you're seeing it from Anna's point of view, and Anna's saying, like, there was a demon in the corner. There was a demon here. There was a demon there. And you realize, like, oh my God, this poor woman is seeing demons. Like, no wonder she's terrified and she just wants to go to a convent. And then it switches to Vasya, completely in another part of the, of the region. And you realize that she's seeing a, what Anna would define as demons, but that are creatures, like they're creatures of nature, they're creatures of the hearth and the forest. And because she was just not raised to be afraid, and because she doesn't perceive them as evil, and it's a completely normal to her, like it's a normal interaction to her. And then you also realize by the end of it, right, because Anna was also a sacrifice that could be made, that Anna was really powerful. So these are two incredibly powerful women, and one of them is completely hobbled by fear.
Mm.
And therefore, like I saw it, yeah, as tragic, because also then when there actually is evil, she doesn't recognize it. But when there is evil, Vasya does recognize it. And it's not these creatures of the forest that, or the creatures inside the house, but because she was raised to be afraid, like I think the author does a really good job at kind of doing that, because at first when you're reading it and you're seeing it from Anna's point of view, you think the same thing. You think, oh, she's seeing demons. Everybody thinks she's crazy, but she actually sees these evil beings. And then you realize that like probably they were the same thing, right? Like that they were like fixing things,
Yeah.
and you realize that like probably it wasn't what she was seeing, but she'd been raised to, it's a fear thing. So yeah, I thought that was tragic, but then also really interesting to see it from those two different points of view, especially when you then see that like there is evil, right? And one of them feeds into it, and one of them doesn't, and it's not who you might think in the beginning.
Hmm. Yeah, it's so funny because when I realized that these creatures helped with like household chores, I was like, man, should I leave out some bread and see if someone will do my laundry? Like, do we have some of these creatures in our house? Because I need someone to, yeah, like fix holes in my socks or something, whatever they were doing. And but then yeah, like you said, her perspective was just like they're evil. And yeah, I feel like there's something there which I hadn't thought about until now, but definitely thinking about how you perceive something like as a blanket evil, then if you don't have the curiosity around it, if you just have fear, then it's like I feel like you're opening yourself up for manipulation because then, like you said, when there's something stronger and that is actually a threat, you're not prepared because you've kind of used all of your energy on this other, in this case, these other creatures that could have helped you. Um, and yeah, she just turned away her gift and it was really sad because not everyone can see them, which I also thought was really interesting about this book, that the only people who could see them until the very last scene, and her brother saw them come in the at the big fight. But yeah, the only two people could see them, and I want to know why. Like that's like one of my questions is I'm curious if it'll be answered in the rest of the trilogy, like why they can actually see them. Um, but I digress. We'll talk about predictions in the future. Uh, but yeah, what did you think about Constantine?
I found him a really interesting character. I was so mad. I was so mad at him for like the whole time. But then he's such an interesting character because
Hmm.
he comes in as like this holy man, but really he wants to be adored, right? He just wants to feed his ego. He's obviously also a really good artist, and like he's obviously he maybe didn't do in life what he could have done, but he wanted to like stir the people into a frenzy, and it obviously manipulates him so that then when
Hmm.
evil comes and says, "Hey, I'm God," he's so full of himself that he doesn't even consider that like maybe that's not God speaking to you.
Yeah.
And so and then he like at a certain point when he was almost killed and Vasya saves him, I thought, okay, maybe this is a moment of redemption because that's also where you realize like he obviously was in love with Vasya, or was really drawn to her freedom. She's a powerful woman, but instead he just continues to want to
Hmm.
control her and push her down and make her small enough so that he can have her. But then he also hates himself because he can't have her. And and at the same time he's really manipulating everyone else and stirring, like kind of stoking this fire, and you realize what, like, kind of slotting into the fear of people, but also slotting into real fears, right? Like the fact that if they don't have enough harvest during the warm months, they are not going to survive those cold winters. Like you are using legitimate fear by saying, oh, by the way, your harvest is going to burn because this one's a witch. So you're slotting into something that someone is afraid of for a real reason, and you're turning it into hysteria,
Hmm.
all because you're just a pathetic little dude. So I just was not a fan, but I'm a fan of the character in that I think she's exploring something incredibly true about
Hmm.
vulnerability and human beings, and what we're not willing to look at and what we are instead willing to look at. Um, and I love that Vasya like schools him. Like I love that she's the one that tells him to his face once in a while, like, are you sure that you're telling me God's will, or are you telling me what you wish the will was? Like, are you hearing what you think is God's voice, but it's your voice? And I thought, like,
Hmm.
oh, I'm so glad that she said it because somebody needed to say it, but it doesn't help because in the end, he's so obsessed with this image of himself as like having been taken away from the people and how he should be adored. So yeah, I didn't like him, but I thought he certainly served a purpose around, kind of like fomenting fear, and also how it's so easy to kind of get so into yourself that then everything that comes in, everything you're absorbing, you just turn it into what you want to serve yourself.
Hmm. Yeah, because there was one part where I think it was the monk who came to with a message or something like that, and
Mm,
he goes and then he goes to see Constantine, and he like has the thought of like there are way too many candles lit, like it was indulgent, and I thought that was the perfect um just representation of Constantine. Like he thought he was being holy and this really like religious leader, but he was being very selfish. And when someone who was, I mean, we don't know the other character as much, but seemed more truly religious and a believer than Constantine came in and was like, what are you, kind of like, what are you doing? Like judging him for it. And yeah, just that ego. And he was bitter from the very beginning. He didn't want to go up to their house. He wanted to stay where he was, where he had all the people who loved him. And he never learned his lesson. Like in the very end, when he took Anna and just essentially threw her in the on the ground, and she's like begging, and he was like, pray about it, and it's like, what are you? That was like so dismissive, but also you didn't learn your lesson. Like
yeah,
you just did this with Vasya and it didn't help anything, and you realize you're speaking to an actual demon, and then you listen to the demon, you like negotiate with the evil and like sacrifice someone. Like he didn't learn his lesson. Like you can't make any sort of deal with the devil. Like he made a deal with the devil to have
right.
people not find out what he'd been doing,
Right.
and he just never learned from it. And yeah, I thought he was just a really interesting character as the opposite of their actual father, who sacrificed himself and was always thinking like, how do I take care of not just my family but the village and all of the animals. There was a part where Vasya went to take care of the horses, and it was her and her dad were the ones who got up early, and he that was something he reflected on, or she did, about how they were the only ones who cared as much about the animals on the farm. And that was so opposite of Father Constantine, who just wanted to paint and have people be like, oh my gosh, that's so amazing. You did such a good job, instead of taking care of someone.
I actually, you saying that made me just think of something that I didn't think about when I was reading the book. It's almost like he wanted to be one of the characters that he was painting. Like he just wanted to be venerated
Yeah,
and just
yeah, you're
told like,
right.
wow, that's so amazing. He didn't actually want to like live the life or do the work he wanted. And he was also in the end, what you were saying about Anna, like he did all of this, right? He created all of this. He fed into her fear. She becomes
Hmm.
pathetic, but because he's manipulating her into it. But then
Yeah.
at the end, he has no problem with allowing a woman to pay the price for his mistakes, and a woman who is ultimately far more powerful than he was, right? Because he had no idea what was going on. Like he of everyone was the most blinded.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that was it when Danya was the vampire or Opier? I don't know how they pronounced it, but um that they went to his house. And my take was that it was because he was the religious figure, but I think that it's because he let in the evil. I think that's
Yeah.
why,
Yeah, I don't think it's
yeah.
because he's the religious. Sorry, I don't want to disagree with you actually. Like,
No, I know I agree, because I think originally I had interpreted it that way, and I think it was maybe you were supposed to feel that way, but now it's like no, it's because he accepted the
yes.
evil. Yeah.
And I think at one point when she's asking the little creature in the oven, whose name I can never remember, the domovoi,
Yeah, the
she's
domovoi. Yeah.
asking him like, why was he allowed in? Like, why could he get in there? I thought you were protecting. And I think he says something like, he's let the darkness in. I can't reach there anymore, or something like that. Like I
Mm,
didn't think that it was going after the religious figure. I thought it was going after him because he's opened himself to darkness.
yeah. In being so focused on protecting himself, he made himself the target because like you said earlier, he had so much ego that he didn't recognize that this was happening.
Also because there was like there had been before he came in as like the priest or whatever they called him, there had been the
Hmm.
one before that had been there for many years, and then I think he was really old and he'd passed on. But they obviously hadn't had problems. So I didn't
Hmm.
see it as like the only element but I saw it, but maybe actually, I'd love to know what you thought of this. The fact that those creatures couldn't go into the church, for me, I kind of read it as a respect thing. Like
Mm,
this is earth magic, and there's a respect for like a different holy place. I wasn't seeing it as they're evil and they can't come in. I was seeing it as like it's a different kind of magic, and they've rubbed along so well up until now, and now they're not because it's been exposed to this darkness.
yeah, I when I read it, because I think that they first kind of mentioned that when we see Anna, yeah, saying that she doesn't see them when she goes to the
Yeah.
church. And so I the first time I when I read it, I read it as more of like a welcome thing, like they just like don't have a need to go there, or they aren't
Mm,
allowed, like they haven't been given permission, which then seems kind of like a vampire, but it's not that evil's not allowed, because evil goes there. That's where it's living. So yeah, it does feel like it's like a maybe a respect thing, or yeah, my interpretation was like a we just don't want you in here, like this is like a private kind of space kind of
yeah.
thing. Um, because yeah, if it was that if the churches could stop evil, then Constantine wouldn't have had the ability to be possessed, but and manipulated the way that he was. But I think that he was just so open for anything that would like raise him up, like allow him to feel like he had power, that it allowed an evil power to come in.
Yeah, it was a power thing. You're right. I agree with that. Like he
Yeah.
wanted it so much that he didn't see anything else. And I think going back to what you were saying also about Anna being afraid, like her whole life that had been her safe space, and then she sees in the church like where the painting thing changes because it's the
Oh yeah.
demon, and she like
Yeah.
goes into hysterics and she says like, oh my God, not here too. And I think we're seeing kind of the complete breakdown of the final like safe space of this woman who doesn't understand what's happening. And I think it breaks her so completely that then she would do anything after that Father Constantine tells her to
Hmm.
do. And but yeah, I hadn't considered before how ultimately powerful she was.
Yeah, I really liked her. Maybe we talk on about some of the themes a little bit, because we're starting to dive into that. Um, but I feel like a big one you kind of just touched on it is for Anna, the moment she lost hope is when she fully broke down, and that's when everything kind of fell apart, is when everyone just really gave into the fear. And of course, that's what the bear fed on. It was fear and disorder and um I think like desperation, he said at one point, and just that complete that's such a negative emotion to me, like that feeling of fear and hopelessness. And I thought that was a really interesting way to represent that theme, to have that be what actually fed him. So if you're afraid of him, then he gets even stronger. And it's like you have to learn to, yeah, almost just have faith, weirdly, which is sort of the opposite of what was happening in the church there, because it was just it felt very Salem witch trials to me, like just hysterical, this like frenzy of like you're a witch, like you're bringing all of this to our community. They did talk about possibly stoning her at one point. So there were a lot of parallels, which I mean, like the history of women and witches is that throughout pretty much all of history, women are accused of being witches and burned at the stake or stoned or drowned. And to see it represented, because I've mostly read it in obviously like New England historical documents or like books and stuff, or European, but to see it from something that was older than the Salem witch trials, because this I think was the 13 or 1400s if I remember correctly. So it was a little bit older than that, and it also a different geographic region, and it's still happening there. And it's like so remote. So it's not like the pilgrims are the same people as in this book.
Right.
But it's just something that's happening historically. It just made me so sad to see all of the fear and how it just quickly broke apart the community bonds that they had there.
Yeah, and it really does, right? Like also at the end, she's leaving. Like they don't, it's not like
Yeah.
there's not, and okay, this is the first of the trilogy, but there's not a redemption arc in the eyes of the villagers. She's sacrificed all of this to protect them, and they are still afraid of her. And they feel like there's one where one of her little brothers, Alyosha, I can't pronounce it, but I think that's
Yeah.
like the nickname that she calls him. He's taking note of where she goes and when she goes so that he can just kind of subtly be there too because he's so worried that they're going to hurt his sister,
Yeah.
which is
I love that.
beautiful.
Yeah.
He's also one of the characters I really like, but you realize that what they're seeing as evil in her is just like she's just a powerful figure. Like she's riding the horses, and I think maybe I don't remember, she's going to warn her father about something, and she's bareback on the saddle and it's really fast, and it's either Alyosha or her father who are like, don't ride back so fast, like they think you're a witch. And you're thinking, yeah, but if it was a man on the back of that horse, nobody would have thought that. But now,
Hmm.
because she's obviously free and unfettered, you're afraid of her, and so automatically she's a witch, right? Which is kind of something that then Father Constantine like really pushes. Like, yes, indeed, because he's so secretly drawn to her. And so instead of ever thinking, oh, maybe I'm the problem, automatically she's the problem.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because you just made me think they I mean a big thing they kept saying is like this is the lot of women, like this is just how it is for women. The idea that either you have children and die in childbirth or you go and you become a nun. And she chose a third path, but in a way she still had the same path because she had to sacrifice herself. She essentially died in the community to protect them the way that being a mother would and like the way that her mom did to give her life. Like she gave the community life by fighting these great evils and just refusing to ignore it, even though they were shunning her. And she still had to do that, even though she chose freedom. Like she still sacrificed herself. And it was still like the lot of being a woman. It's just a different type and just less traditional, I guess is how I would say it. The discussion of being a woman in this book really made me glad I'm alive now. And there's still a lot of flaws today. So,
It was interesting also because of the mindset. Because every time she would kind of say that, something was not, that she didn't want to do something, or she did want to do something, and they would just say, oh, well, a cage is just a woman's lot. And
yeah. Oh my God, that made me so mad.
and it also just made me think, obviously back then, because that was just how it was, that it was super strange that you would be thinking differently. And it made me think there's a saying, and I can't remember who said it, but it's something like, before something starts, it seems impossible, and then after you've started it, it was inevitable.
Yes, that's one of my favorite quotes. It's at first it seems impossible, then improbable, then inevitable.
Right.
Yeah.
And it makes me think also of like whatever changes we need to see in today, right now, maybe it feels impossible, but maybe it's actually inevitable, because if you think back to
Hmm.
how hard won women's rights are and how shaky they still are.
Hmm.
But then if you go back to that time period, it was just, oh, this is just how it is. And if women back then had just said, oh, that's just how it is, you're right. Like it takes those outliers over the centuries to make this kind of lasting change. And it just made me think a lot about, the work that still has to be done today.
Hmm. Yeah, you're right. She was one of the women, I mean, she's fiction, but women like her
Still
were the
counts,
ones
still counts.
who helped create the evolution and um I love that she just refused because she was like, I would rather die than go to the convent and be trapped. And that's, I think, where they said, well, a cage is to be a woman.
Yeah.
And then she did. She went out and she met death, which I think we should talk about as well. Like the is it Morosco? Is death itself. And she goes to him and he's like, what did you think was gonna happen? You went out in the middle of the night when it's extremely cold. Of course you were gonna die. And she's like, well, what choice did I have? And he's like, just what are you thinking? You know? But it was like, yeah, I mean, if the choice is to be imprisoned in her perspective or free, you know, even if your freedom is short, I think most people would choose the freedom over being imprisoned.
I don't know that I think that most people would choose. I think people a lot of times will choose comfort over freedom. But I
Yeah,
like that she doesn't.
that's true. That's well, and we see, I mean, a lot of people, she's the only one in the book who chooses that.
Yeah.
Everyone else is like, well, tell me what to do to stay safe and to have this life that I've been living because like people don't want to change. It's interesting. I guess I would want to choose freedom. So,
I think I would like to I like to think that I would also want to choose freedom. But yes, I
yeah.
agree that I don't know how to pronounce that, but he's a really interesting character too, right?
Yeah, because we see him several times. I mean, the first time you hear about him is when Dunya's telling the story about
Hmm.
the woman who like sent the daughter gets sent out and then she comes back with the riches, you know. And then we see him a few more times. I was really confused. Was he the same one who gave the dad the like pendant, or was that someone else?
So this is where I'm okay. I think yes, but this is actually one of the questions I have about the book is that there's this whole thing with the pendant where it's really important, and he is really portrayed as like an antagonist, right? He's not portrayed as one of the good guys so much. He's also like with Dunya, he's kind of threatening her, like there's a threat involved.
Mm-hmm.
And then at a certain point, it kind of changes to be that he's trying to protect her. And then once she meets him, like it's you I never got the feeling like I got the feeling more that he was like kind of bumbling around her. Like at some point he even said something and one of the horses was like, wow, you really screwed that up. Like it turned into a completely different character. And then at one point he
Yeah,
kisses her, so you think, oh, is Death in love with her? Is he Father
yeah,
Frost? Like I don't so I think that yes, he's the one who get but that whole mini storyline where he goes and meets the father and the brother and then gives the pendant kind of, at least in this book, to me, unless I missed a piece, like it doesn't wrap up then, like there isn't
yeah.
a wrap up of that storyline. And I also had the same question. I said, okay, I'm assuming that it's the same one, but the character shift in him is so big, or at least I perceived it as so big, that I didn't like it took me I had to make an assumption that yes, he gave her this pendant, also because there isn't a huge role for the pendant, right? Like she mentions it and it's supposed to protect her, but it's not as big of a thing as it is depicted when there's a whole thing with the dad and the brother and the giving of the pendant. And then he goes to Dunya's dreams and he's like, you got to give it to her. And Dunya's like, no, she's not ready. And then all of a sudden, they're both protecting her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought that too. I kept waiting for like at the end, I thought that that was gonna be what stopped the bear guy from becoming free. Like I thought it would because it kind of said it glowed on her, but that was it. So I think, yeah, I'm assuming it's because it's the first book in a trilogy, so we'll learn more about it later. But I was like you, I was very much like, oh, I think this is gonna be a really big role in the book, and then it was not as big of a role. But I did think it was interesting, and I like how it kept they did keep bringing it back, like, oh, you have to give it to her, it's time, all of that. Okay, I maybe we just talk for a minute about how unexpectedly scary this book was because I was not prepared for that. I was like, oh, wintry vibes. And maybe it's because I've read too much cozy fantasy lately. But then when it like the last third of the book, I was just terrified. I stayed up reading 2 nights in a row, and the first night was right when the first vampire creature came. And I was like, I had to use the flashlight on my phone after I turned off the light to like go to bed because I was like, I don't want to walk in the dark. I'm so scared. And the creature, the evil guy was using shadows and stuff to like control people. So I was just like, yeah, this book was way scarier than I was expecting. And I'm like, man, this isn't even classified as horror. I do not read horror at all. So maybe everyone listening was not scared, but it got pretty, yeah, like a little jumpy there for a period.
I was terrified. I like it completely scared. Like it was much darker than I anticipated. And okay, the whole book is dark, right? In the sense, but through most of it, I was thinking, okay, this is like it's like winter dark. It's not scary dark.
Yeah.
Because all of it is, I mean, they are through most of the book, they're scared for one reason or another. And through the whole book, they are cold. So you get the feeling of cold and dark throughout the whole thing. But then the last portion of it, I was absolutely terrified. Like you, I stayed up at night to read it and I could not go to sleep, especially when it turns out that the vampire-like creature is Dunya, her mother figure, and she's like
Yes.
tapping on the scratching at the window, being like, I'm cold. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Like that terrified me. It was much, and then when you realize that like he lets the darkness into the church and the paintings on the wall are changing because of the like that scared me. Like that was probably a step further than I would normally want to read.
Yeah.
Because until it's like winter dark, okay, but like you, I don't read horror, and I also like especially not like horror in a church. And that was where I thought, okay, no, 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 like I don't want to do this anymore. Um,
Yeah. It was definitely like a horror movie. Like it was,
the
yeah.
end, yeah, for sure. It
Yeah.
it becomes there's a horror element for sure there.
Yeah. Well, I thought because the when Dunya died and because she was scared at the
Oh,
very end, like the moment she died, that was just heartbreaking to me. Like the idea that she was scared, but then I love that they were able to bring it back and
yeah.
have her not be scared, even though she was this vampire, and then she was able to kind of move on like in a more like her state, which I liked. But the fact that we had to like see her go through all of
Oh,
that, oh yeah, that was
that
just so
was
hard.
heart-wrenching. I'm also really happy that in the end, like I would have been really unhappy if they didn't arc that completely, like if they didn't close that
Hmm.
and that she found peace, because that was devastating. And in a way, it's also beautiful, right? Because Vasya literally gives her blood. And like it's kind of like
Yeah.
you gave me everything you had and now let me. And then you realize though that like it can't save her forever, but then and she says, no, you need to bring her now. Like even if it's dangerous for me, you need to make sure she's safe. And I think that's also something we relate to, right? Like that's also
Hmm.
something that you like what you want for the people that you love is that they are safe. So for her, it's
Yeah.
devastating, but the fact that you have to go through this journey is just the heart, like it takes your heart right out of your chest. Like it was so much, especially because like the death scene, exactly like you said, where at first she's peaceful, which that's also when you realize that Marasco's not evil, right? Because he's not taking away their peace. And then the other guy swoops in, and then
Hmm.
you realize that she dies. No, that's the worst. I did not like that, but I was glad that she in the end looped it around so that Dunya found peace. But yes, the I found the last part like very horror coded.
Yeah. Yeah, you just made me think one thing that I really liked about this book was the portrayal of her sibling relationships
Hmm.
and how close they all were. And Alyosha, her brother, at the end, where he was there protecting her, but he really respected her too. And they were pretty close in age, I think. Yeah, he was like 3 years older than her, 2 or 3 years older than her. And yeah, I just loved the the familial love that was shown in this
Mhm.
book, and that dynamic, and how kind of how that's like what saves the day, like all of them being together and just loving each other, and they always had her back. Like it there was never the, even with her younger sister, Anna's daughter, there wasn't that like evil stepsister dynamic.
Yeah.
Like they all had love for each other.
Yeah.
And I really love that about this book.
Yeah, I like that too. I think that, yeah, the storyline shows love in so many really beautiful ways that really speaks to you. And I think it's also part of why then you're devastated when things don't necessarily go quite how you want them to go. But I think it's also realistic.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay, should we talk about some of our favorites and then do
Yeah,
some predictions?
yeah.
Okay, what was your favorite scene?
My favorite scene. Maybe you should go first.
Okay, my favorite one was actually when Vasia's engaged, like I think it was the day before her wedding or something, when she steals his horse
Oh,
and
yeah.
runs to like save her nephew. I love that because because she was able to use kind of that secret gift of, knowing the horses, and this guy was, it talked about how he loved his horses, and then he was just awful. I hated him. I was like, please do not let her marry him. And she did that and went to save her a family member and also the horse. And then that is what protected her from this awful marriage. Like I just love that scene. I thought it was so nice. And then it did show, I mean, everyone was like looking at her, like how could you ride a horse like that? And just her leaning into that wildness to save people. I loved it. That was, yeah, one of my favorite parts.
And you knew, like in the beginning, I thought, oh, because I think there's a scene in the beginning when they're gonna set her up with this guy. There's a scene where the dad and the brother are like, oh, but he seems like he's a good man, and so that will be a good husband for her. And so you're thinking like, oh, great, maybe she's gonna catch a break. Maybe it's gonna be a nice man. And then you realize that he comes in, and at one point somebody says like, yes, but his horse doesn't like him, and
Yeah.
he's
Hmm.
not a good guy because his horse doesn't like him. And that's when you're like, please, oh my gosh, please, like drive him away somehow. Like that's not. Yeah, I love that one too.
Yeah.
Um, I think my favorite, I mean, I don't know if this counts because it's not so much a scene, but I mean, it's tied to a scene. I love how she treats the creatures. Like I love how what she brings out is also the goodness in them because at one point I think the creature
Yeah.
of I don't know if it's the domovoi or the creature in the stables. Like she tells him, like, how can I make you stronger? And he tells her, like, I can survive off of like some milk and bread. And then he says, it can also be blood, but it doesn't have to be. It can also be milk and bread. And she gives him milk and bread. So it never goes down this kind of weird path that it could have gone down.
Hmm.
And so and the fact that she has this really kind relationship with the Rusalka who actually just wants a friend. And so
Yeah.
even though she's supposed to be this evil thing, but she just wants a friend. And when she's going to kill the Constantine, she stops because Vasya tells her to stop. And then I think
Hmm.
one of my favorite scenes is when the Rusalka in the end turns, even though she's siding with the Winter King because it's her nature to do so. And she tells Vasya before, she says, when he calls, I will go. Like that is my nature.
Hmm.
And you can't even blame her because she's owning her nature. But then how when
Hmm.
it comes down to it, she's not going to turn against Vasya, who's been kind to her. And so I think
Hmm.
that's maybe my favorite scene, just tied to the fact that Vasya is the one who's kind of being friends and therefore all of this stuff that could have turned quite grisly doesn't. and it's really just because of the kindness of her, but also these creatures being of a nature to protect the household and the people that used to coexist with them, right? Because they're not asking for worship, they're asking to coexist. And so I
Hmm.
think that kind of final scene, even though I don't like that whole scene because it, like we were talking about, it gives me so much anxiety, but I think that element of that scene where everyone is rushing in to defend her is beautiful.
Yeah, it is so beautiful that they all show up for her. Yeah, I love that part of this book. Who is your favorite character?
Oh, that's really hard. Maybe, no, that's so hard. I was gonna say maybe uh, Alyosha, just because I love that like camaraderie between them. Like you were saying, I love that familial relationship.
Hmm.
Maybe that one.
Yeah, I really liked him too. But I think I like their father the most.
Mm.
He definitely had just so much happening in the book. But they were all really good characters. I feel like they all brought something to the story, and yeah, I mean, we could just spend forever just discussing the characters. Okay, so predictions. So I only wrote one down, which is that in the rest of the books, she's gonna end up with a Winter King.
Oh, I
And
think that too.
which I don't know how I feel about it. Like it because he's this ancient god. I don't know. I never know how I feel about like God and human relationships, which I know uh you explore in your book as well. So I feel like that would be like a whole nother discussion. But it feels like it happened very abrupt in this one. It was just like suddenly he was interested in her and she like asked about his bed, so they were kind of flirting in like a really weird way. So I'm like, I think that that's going to happen in future books. So I'm curious to see how that manifests.
I'm curious to see how that manifests too, because that also weirds me out. But the whole like being that is many centuries old, and then
Hmm.
the 20 18 year old girl also wildly always weirds me out. Like I always have like a difficult time with that. Um, but also because like you said, like it wasn't really, there wasn't a lot of like, you're not all of a sudden, like I think in the middle of the battle or before the battle, he kisses her like out of
Hmm.
nowhere. And I'm like, well, but consent is also a thing. And what was she doing in that moment that made you think that it was okay to kiss her? Like, I don't know. I
Yeah.
feel weird about it. But then he also is clearly kind of her safe harbor, right? Because at the end of the book, she's going back to the horses, um,
Hmm.
and the bear and him, not the bear. She's going back to
Yeah, the
the
Winter
I
King.
keep
Yeah.
saying the Winter King, but I mean because I think in like folklore he's the Frost King, the death.
I thought that are they not the same? They're different?
Well, he's supposed to be. Wait, let me. So Morosco is supposed to be Father Frost.
Oh, okay.
And he's a winter demon and he's the brother of Medved. And Medved is the bear and the one-eyed man. So they're
Mm.
brothers. Now, I don't know the folklore around it. Like I only know what I've looked up. I don't know a lot of the background of it. But
Hmm.
anyway, she goes to him at the end, right, with the horses. And that's
Yeah.
also sad because that also feels quite isolated, right? Like I hope that in
Hmm.
the next books she finds community in not just death.
Yeah, that's true. The fact that he is death. Yeah. I think that she's gonna travel in the next books and maybe go somewhere warm. I'm like, can she go somewhere warm since the series is
Can we
called the
send her to
Winter
the
Night
Bahamas to
Trilogy?
get a break? Like, she just like,
Yeah. Well, she wants to go to, I think it's Istanbul,
yes, they
Sargard
do
or
mention
Sargrad.
it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think she'll probably end up there. Yeah, I think that the the Blue Jewel, that's I'm curious to see that has to play a bigger role in the rest of the series. So I'm
We'll
curious
see.
to see how that goes. I don't even know what it could be. I'm like, maybe it's like the source of her magic. My theory is that her family, because they said the granddaughter of the witch. So it was like her, yeah, her mom's mom was the one who rode back from the woods. So maybe like, I was like, is he her father? Like, but no, because her
Oh.
father's her. There's something going on with her family there, and the jewel relates to it. That's my
Okay, yeah.
prediction.
Because also we don't really actually find out who the mother is. I mean, we know like, or is it the mother's mother? The one who
The
was
mother's
in,
mother. Yeah.
yeah, like who came
Yeah.
in and that like nobody, there's a whole thing about how she's
A
the
witch.
witch
Yeah.
and how this whole thing and how and then at one point Dunya and Marina are talking and Marina's the mom and they're
Yeah.
talking and she says remember your mother, like remember what your mother was when she left or something like that, but it's never you never actually find out. I'm
Yeah.
hoping you find out in the subsequent books.
Yeah. I'm excited. I think I'll read the rest of the series because it's fun. Well, it's winter right now, so it's like, well, this is the time.
Yeah,
I need to read them right now. And yeah, I'm curious what happens. It was fun. I think this was a good recommendation.
yeah,
Especially if I were gonna recommend it to anyone, I would definitely say read it in January or the end of December or like early February, like when it's cold out,
yeah.
so you can really get the
Yeah.
vibe. Yeah.
And like get cozy, like heated blanket, hot chocolate, like do it up because you will be cold while you're reading it. But it gives you so much to chew on. There are so many layers of it. I thought it was a good read. I certainly think it was worth the read. I'm gonna let you read two and three first and tell me if it's scary. And if it's not
Okay.
as scary, I would also like to read two and three because I also really want to know what happens because the story I thought was built really well. Like it was done really well and the
Yeah.
themes were really interesting. And I also want to know what happens to the other brother who's like the warrior. Like he's
Yeah.
also, because I think that's also a positive religious figure, right? Like
Hmm.
he's in the church, but he's a warrior. He's protecting his people. I think the author's good at making these kind of hybrids. Like it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be kind of what you're told you have to be. And he goes off and kind of does his thing, even though it's sad that, she can't necessarily. And I think at some point that's also brought up where they say, like, oh, she's a woman, so she can't do that. But then maybe
Hmm.
she does do that anyways. Like maybe that's the second book. That's my prediction. Maybe that's what
Mm. Yeah, I think that that would be interesting if like maybe the next book is like her with her brother and then one's like her with her sister, who she wanted to go live with too. Well, do you have any final thoughts on the book?
No, that's it on my end. Good read. I recommend it.
Yeah, yeah, I think we covered a lot. This was so fun. Thank you so much for joining and
Thank
talking with
you.
me about this.
This was so much fun. It's always fun to get to chat with you.
Well, I agree. Definitely come back. Well, everyone who's listening or if you're watching this on YouTube, let us know what you thought of the book, if you were scared or if we're just the only ones who were scared,
Yeah.
which is totally fair. I did find it scary. But yeah, thank you everyone for listening. I hope you enjoyed it and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.